Hey friends, Catherine Korostoff here, and I am very excited today because I have a guest joining me. My old friend and former colleague, Judy Melanson, is here with us today to talk about a really important topic, which is about how can we challenge assumptions about how we do our market research presentations. As many Research Rockstar students know, at the end of a project, we really want to shine. This is often the part of the project people remember the most. Right? You've done a fabulous job running a project, whether it was quantitative or qualitative or phases of both. And you may have done a brilliant job troubleshooting all sorts of things throughout that whole process. But what a lot of clients really remember the most is what happens at the end, that final report, that final presentation. So I was really excited to recently be talking to Judy about her thoughts and experiences with challenging assumptions about how we do the presentations to really have the most impact on market research success. So welcome, Judy. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Catherine.
And for those of you who haven't met Judy before, I'm sharing a bio slide for her. And I know Judy from her leadership roles at Chadwick Martin Bailey, but of course she's had a number of very fascinating experiences, including as an instructor, which of course is near and dear to my heart. And Judy is just extremely well known and well respected in the market research industry. And she's done just brilliant research for a number of leading brands over the years. So we're very lucky to have her here today to share her experience. And I'll also post her contact information if we have any students who'd like to follow up with her personally. So Judy, to get us started, I think I already kind of gave away the segue here, but is it time to really challenge the way we talk about market research presentations?
I think it is, Catherine. And part of the reason is we need to think about why it is that we're conducting research in the first place, right? Our clients are looking to reduce the uncertainty around their decision-making, right? They're looking to sleep better at night. You want to capture new perspectives or new ideas or new thoughts from your research, new insights into the marketplace. But most importantly, you want to drive decisions, right? You want to help to support the decisions of your clients, your stakeholders. And so, let's just think for a minute, why might we want to change from a more typical PowerPoint or slide-based presentation? And Catherine, you and I have been doing this for a few decades, and that's what we were doing many years ago. And so I think what we need to do is to ask ourselves a couple of questions. Are there better methods or tools to engage with our stakeholders to actually socialize the results that we've worked so hard, as you've said, to acquire, and to help them activate those results, right? To actually use the learnings that you're presenting and put it into their business plans. And I think that we can all agree that there may be some better ways to help people to learn, right? Rather than asking them to sit and listen to an hour long or even a half-hour presentation. We know that people learn in different ways, right? Part of it is auditory, right? Hearing things. Part of it is visual, but then there is that tactile, that engaging, right? That's important to some people and how they learn. The second thing is related to our audiences, many of whom are Gen Z, right? Many of our millennials, right? Many of them have participated in team-based activities and through the course of their schooling, their academic career, right? And they want to participate. They want to share what it is that they've learned, not only hear from you and what it is that you've learned. I think too, we've all been in presentations where or maybe around your dinner table, right? Where the cell phones are underneath the table and people keep on looking down to kind of check their cell phones, right? There's so many distractions as we're trying to capture people's attention and share with them what we've learned. And then finally, we all, after the year and a half that we've had, there's a Zoom fatigue, right? Where we are tired of meetings, we are tired of Zooms. So I think this is a great chance to think differently about, as you said, that final stage of the research project when you're sharing out the results and looking to engage with people for these reasons.
So you've touched my heart in a few ways because you've intersected with a lot of the things that we talk about in terms of training as well, right? So a lot of it is sort of what I'm hearing from you is some of the keywords that I'm hearing from you about learning and activating are things that we think about, the other instructors here and I, when we're planning our courses here at Research Rockstar, how do you not just give people the best practices and the factual information about research methodologies, but how do you activate that for them in a way that they can actually understand it, retain it, and then apply it. And I feel like it's sort of the same thing. It's sort of like almost taking a training perspective through participation, through having more participatory types of presentations, which is really interesting to me. So can you give me an example then? You've painted this wonderful picture about what our ideals are about, but what might that look like for a researcher who's perhaps more used to conventional presentations? What kinds of things should they be thinking about for their next presentations if they try to embrace this sort of mindset?
Yeah, I think what you've just mentioned and kind of the other instructors at Research Rockstar, right, spend a lot of time planning this out, right? You think carefully about the actual kind of information that will be shared, and then you think about how that gets shared. And I think that's what we'll be talking about today, right? So this is different, and it does require, it requires the researcher to think differently. Planning for a presentation is very different from planning some more participatory workshop. And I think that making that differentiation is important as we go through today's kind of discussion, Catherine.
Excellent, excellent. I'm eager to hear more about how we define it.
Yeah, and how we do it.
Yes, let's getting down to practicality here. Absolutely.
So I think it's, first off, it's important to think about like the types of research that you're doing, right? That you're engaging in, and the types of research projects that might be most appropriate just to a PowerPoint presentation, or even sharing a deck, or putting an infographic out and being kind of like, clap, clap, I'm all done, right? But there are other research projects that hopefully you're also engaged in, or your students are also engaged in, which are more strategic in nature, right? Which have, maybe not the tactical or just kind of the how did we do performance type of elements, right? Which are more easily conveyed through maybe some other type of deliverable or some type of presentation. I think if there are, if the research is strategic in nature, if there is a future orientation to the research where there are multiple perspectives that need to be considered, right? Where there is it's not that there's one right answer, but there are varying degrees of, varying degrees and multiple criteria that need to be considered. Wonderful opportunity to bring people together. And then finally, if it is a cross-departmental type of initiative, bringing people together so that they can all sit together, bring their perspectives, bring their information, bring the barriers that they might have present either in their head or through their workflows to executing on certain things, it's a wonderful time. Again, our job is to bring the knowledge of the marketplace to our stakeholders, but then they have to believe it, they have to understand it, and then they have to act on it.
Awesome. I love all the points that you've said, and it reminds me of different conversations I've had recently with some of my students where I do have students who are working on more strategic projects that can be cross-functional. I've got students who are doing market segmentation projects right now, some of them for the very first time. I have students who are on insights teams where product roadmap planning is huge. So they're doing research to inform, what should our 3 to 5 year product roadmap be, even though we all know it'll change, but what is the direction? What are, some of the key things that we should be working towards? And I know we always have students who are working on message testing or studies related to how do we leverage sources of pain, customer aspirations, so that we can design marketing messages that will rise above the noise. Right. So some of the types of projects that our students I know are working on in real life, I think would be a fit for this kind of thing. Is that right?
Oh, I think you're exactly right. I mean, and just another note, I think I want to say right here too, like what you've described, like a product roadmap, right? There are a number of research projects that are progressing along that, right? So today we're going to be thinking about or talking mostly about isolated research projects like a market research project, but new product development or identifying a new market to tackle with an existing products, like those are really exciting, strategic, hard to execute, and require a team, right? So we're going to be talking about this post-research presentation, right? And how an alternative to that PowerPoint presentation, but actually the engagement with your stakeholders could begin at the kickoff, right, could begin at the initiation of some, stage gate product development process, right? So it still is, I think, a very helpful thing to have this workshop at the end for some types of projects, but there may be other touch points that will be required with your team throughout the course of, these strategic projects that your students are working on. On the other hand, Catherine, it's also fun to think about applying a workshop type perspective to a research project that's gotten a bit old, like a brand tracker, right? So we'll talk about that too as we go along. So strategic projects, cross-functional projects, future-oriented projects are a natural for this, but let's not let's not draw a box solely around those types of projects.
No, that makes a ton of sense to me. Thank you. So can we start talking about examples?
Let's do it. So examples of projects?
Of this type of, like, can you give me an example of a more participatory presentation or workshop and what that looks like?
Yeah. I'm thinking of 3 that I'd like to share. One was a project that we were working on for Talc Worldwide, right? So they're a tour company, and they had noticed that the age of their attendees, right? They knew this is starting to kind of age, and they needed to start to develop some options for a younger audience. So we had done a series of research projects along the way. But I think, recognizing that Talc is full of passionate, engaged, smart people who wanted to bring their insights to this initiative, right? New product development. And so what we did is we set up a workshop. We kicked it off as people came into the room with some great YouTube videos, Bruce Springsteen and some other kind of people as they were talking to the audience that we were most interested in. We presented them with information, right? So we had given everybody a bit of homework, and we asked people to bring something from their home that represented what this new target seeks. Right, so a bag of arugula showed up, a very fancy champagne glass showed up, a compass, something that this audience would take when they travel. Like so people went around and described what it is that they had brought, which helped us all to think about the people and the information that would be required to get them to book and to design a program that would be happy and successful for them. So just an example, like we continued on with it was a probably 6-hour workshop, but we kicked it off in that way. We engaged them. We'd given them some homework, and then we assigned them a couple of tasks. We had a number of different props for people to use. Small group brainstorm. The laughter and the excitement kind of was palpable in the room at that time. They worked for a few minutes, they came together, they presented. We then prioritized what we liked from that, sent people back, they came back together. And then at the end of the day, it wasn't that anyone came up with a specific campaign or a specific product that would ever make the light of day, but we were able to get people aligned with what it is that we were looking for. And thinking across all of the different functional areas represented about how to engage and entertain this new audience. I talked too much about that one to tell you about 2 more, but that was just a great one. Market segmentation, is such a natural in that same way. Giving people a pre-read, asking them to think about the segment that they were assigned, bringing them together where they could kind of present that thing from home about who that person is. Right, who that person is, not 47%, are this, or, like taking the stats out of it and starting to describe and actually kind of socialize, right? That's what we're talking about, so that then we can activate. So if that's the person who's worried about travel and who's traveling with a compass and, a couple of spare bags for this or that, like, what do we need to do to help to capture that person's attention and then to actually make them book with us, right? So it's that type of like engaging, super fun, high energy, starting with the information but launching into the business.
You know, it's so funny because listening to you talk about these homework assignments, it reminds me of things we do in focus group research, right? Where you try to get people to, pick a picture that represents, we use indirect methods to kind of help us tell the story.
Everything about this workshop, the corollary for that, what we're talking about today is focus groups, right? We need to think carefully about who we're going to invite, right? So we almost need a screener. We need to think carefully about the actual agenda and how we're going to entertain people, right? We need to plan this in advance, thinking about the facility. Is it a typical focus group room, or is it a more creative type of environment that we're looking for? How are we going to incentivize these people? What is it that we want to learn from them as they're learning from us? Right. So there is that planning that goes into a focus group, very similar to the planning that we'd be doing for a workshop. There's the execution of the focus group, where you have a carefully scripted moderator's guide, right? You have a number of activities, a number of questions, and then you have a number of spares in your back pocket, just in case what you're presenting isn't kind of leveraging. You're watching the engagement, like we talked about earlier. Are people participating? Are people laughing, right? Are they excited?
Is there a dominant respondent?
Is there? Right. And that's a super important. I mean, the other question is, like, can you facilitate this yourself, or for which types of assignments, or for which type of audiences might you need to hire an external facilitator? Because it's much easier for an external facilitator who's not aware of all of the internal politics to stand behind somebody and pat them on the shoulder and say, Catherine, it was so nice that you've talked so much, but let's let some of these other people talk, right? And it's harder for maybe a researcher who has to work with these people day in and day out, right? So, but seeing the corollary to focus groups is exactly right.
I just love so many of the things that you've said. Now, I know that some of my students are going to have a couple of questions, though. For example, how much homework is it realistic for me to give to people? If I'm doing one of these on a market segmentation project, for example, and so ahead of time, I guess I would have had to have given them the segmentation model and enough detail about the segments so that whatever segment I assign to them for the workshop, that they'll have had time to digest that data and really think about it. How do you sort of set those expectations, and how much is it realistic, like, to ask people to do ahead of time in terms of pre-reading your research results so they come to the workshop ready?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And thinking about the timing of the workshop, I think as well is a super important component, right? So this requires a great deal of work on the part of the researcher, right? Because you really do, you can't provide somebody with the whole presentation that you might hope to give in person to some audience about your market segmentation. What you're really looking to do is to provide them with enough detail about what it is that you've created. So here it is, maybe it is the kind of the map of all the segments, and then a deep dive on one segment. Right. So that and what you are, again, every situation is different. Right. So just brainstorming here with you, but maybe you ask each person to really explore, a different segment. Right. So you have 2 or 3 people who are looking into segment 2. They think about segment 2 and they come prepared to talk about segment 2. I think we overestimate often how much people can really learn in a market research presentation. We as researchers have fallen in love with the data. Oh, we love the data, right? And honestly, yes. When you're on the other side listening to research presentations, you just don't need to know it all. And what we're trying to do with this is really start to socialize the results, what's most important, and then to help people to act on it. And so what I'd suggest in the course of the workshop itself is that you or the facilitator, start off with something inspiring and fun. Like I talked about that, Bruce Springsteen, or, have music, have a fun YouTube video, have a cartoon, have something that's going to make people laugh and start to get that this isn't a typical market research presentation. And then max 5 slides. No, max 10 slides. Like, so, okay, guys, before we get started, I just want to make sure that we're all grounded in what it is that we did and what we learned. Boom, boom. Now I've given you all a little bit of homework so you could deep dive into, different topics. And we're going to ask you to step up as experts on that topic. But you say you're sending people, I don't know, Catherine, you said 5 slides, 8 slides as homework. I'm not sending anybody a 100-page deck.
Got it. So let me ask you a question then. In reality, when you've done these things, then is it typically that there's going to be a sort of standard full presentation for people who want the deep, give it to me, Judy, for an hour. I want to ask a lot of questions. And then the workshop is something that comes afterwards at a separate event?
So I think you need to challenge yourself about who needs to be invited to that first presentation, right? Who really needs to know all of that? And then think carefully about that. Like if you do have a cross-functional team, does everybody need to have that? Or is there a way for you to think differently about that rollout, the research rollout? And this, to your point about how instructors plan their activation and socialization of your information, like what do people need to know? And then make yourself available post-workshop to give more data, to give more information. You really want to get people together to inspire them, right? To engage them. And then, we've talked about like the remote versus in person, and this is all so much more fun to do in person. I know remote is a thing, but post-COVID, we're all so desperate to see each other, to get people actually together, participate in this way. There's even a team building, part of this as well. So.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
So then success, I'm thinking about success, and I know it seems like you really are going to have whoever the client is ultimately on something like this, you are really going to need them to endorse this idea. So for example, if you're on the insights team at Brand X and you're planning on this kind of workshop, it's going to be really important that the managers of the teams who are being invited or of the participants who are coming from different teams, that the managers really back you up and say, hey guys, this is important. I'm excited about this. And I really need you guys to do that homework so that everybody kind of has a little bit of accountability, right? You're going to need some, sort of executive endorsement to make sure that people really show up prepared.
Yeah, and I know that every organization is different, right? And the stakeholders are different. And the role of the researchers are different, right? So there are so many things that so much more about your Research Rockstar students and the opportunities and the challenges and the struggles that they're working toward. But I am entirely optimistic that we're planning this workshop. It's not that you're doing this for every research project, but you're doing it for select research projects because bringing people together with the variety of perspectives that they have will help to enrich the decision-making for the organization, right? So this is important. So if people aren't showing up prepared, then I think you should uninvite them. You should ask them to leave, just like you would in a focus group, right? Like this is, and you are giving them an opportunity to come to help to structure the vision for the future of the market segmentation, kind of like how you go about, whatever the objective of your market segmentation is, how you go about structuring your new product for this new audience, right? This is an important conversation. And yes, you want to elevate it, right? And you want people to be excited about it. And yes, you want the leadership, the key stakeholders to be super excited about this. I would hope that they would. Like all of the examples that I've had, all of the opportunities I've had to participate in these types of workshops have been extremely successful. People are engaged. People do laugh. People do learn. And then one of the things that I think is exciting is to think about like what the post-workshop follow-up might be, right? I just think that's an interesting question because we've carefully planned this. We've executed this, as we've said, engaging activities, lots of brainstorming, some type of prioritization, right? So maybe a parking lot issue over here. Right. So at the end of this, I think it's exciting to think about like, is there more research that needs to be done? Are there some gaps in the coverage that we've identified today? Are there things on our parking lot that are super important? Are there other groups that should participate in a program like this? Like, oh, because people always said, oh, Joe was out today and he should have been here, or we should definitely get the digital team to be engaged in this. But I also think it's really interesting to think about, and again, the role of the researcher who is evolving and kind of into a business partner, strategic consultant through the course of this may say, guys, I think we should come back together in 8 weeks. There are certain things that we've talked about today. Each of our teams need to kind of go back and discuss this. Let's come back together and start to have a conversation about executing, actually kind of activating, putting these results into action. So again, each situation is different. This is not in any way a one size fits all, but I think given where we've been, given who we as researchers are trying to be, the role that we as researchers are trying to take, making our research have more impact in the organization, elevating our role as a strategic consultant to our business partners. I think this gives us a tool to actually enable that.
Judy, you've just been so inspiring. I want to thank you so much for this discussion. And I really love where we're kind of ending right now, which is this idea that the workshop is not just about being an alternative way of doing a presentation, but it is a way of helping us as researchers to sort of elevate our role and our ability to be involved now at a more strategic level in an ongoing way, which is obviously where a lot of us are aspiring to these days. Yeah. So that's fantastic. And now, of course, you're an amazing facilitator with a ton of experience. So I guess just in closing, for some of our students are newer to research, newer in their career paths. They're not going to have the maybe the confidence that an experienced facilitator can exude. So if we wanted to give our students maybe just a couple of pointers on what are some of the skills that they can work on developing so that they can be ready to help plan and facilitate these sorts of workshops, are there a couple of skills that you would suggest that they work on?
So if you've had the opportunity to moderate focus groups, then you've already kind of started down the path of developing these skills, right? It is, when you're moderating focus group, you need to be aware of, you need to kind of partition your brain. You need to know where you are in the moderator guide, and how much, time is left. You need to think about the group dynamics, right? You need to think about the individual people and say, well, Catherine told me, this at the beginning, and now she's saying this. So you need to be able to kind of like circle back with her to understand that, right? You need to be able to think about what the clients are thinking behind so there's just a lot of things that are going on in your brain. And the same is true when you're running a workshop. It's exhausting. It's like, to do this well, is really it requires a lot of energy. And it also, like I said, it requires a couple of exercises in your back pocket. Like if this seems to be bombing, if the energy seems to be lagging, if people seem to be checking their phones, then you need to be able to shake it up, right? So it does. Catherine, I don't know if you remember at CMB, I used to have a projecting confidence CMBU. So.
Oh, sorry, I totally forgot about that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Right. So I think the most important thing that I can say is that all of your students, you're all like, what is that? The help, right? You're smart. You're like, you are good. You know what you're talking about. So just like my visual, this dates me. I heard it on the radio as I was driving to the airport one morning at 5 o'clock for a trip out to Las Vegas. I was really nervous about the presentation. And I heard Margaret Thatcher. And she was talking about Pinochet down in Chile, and she was absolutely dead wrong about what she was saying. But she said it with such confidence. Nobody argues with Margaret Thatcher. So I would show up for hard presentations, and I would advocate for or Beyonce has a stage. She has a stage presence too. That's probably more culturally relevant here. Like you put up your chin,
channel your inner Beyonce.
Put up your chin, prepare, like be prepared. Be prepared.
Right.
And then show up. Walk out on stage and slam it and start singing.
Yeah, awesome. Judy, you're fantastic. And I really appreciate your time on this. I could see talking to you easily for another half an hour on this topic, but I really do appreciate your time today. And I will post your information for our students who may want to follow up. And for our students at Research Rockstar, if you have any questions about this topic, or if this is something you'd like to see more on, please let me know. We can perhaps have Judy back for a part 2.
So fun to see
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
Okay. Bye.